Malcolm Jamal Warner's words hung in the air, quiet, deliberate, heavy. I've been fighting hopelessness. It wasn't a confession for sympathy. It was a flicker of truth from a man who rarely let his guard down. His gaze cut through the lens as if speaking directly to each person watching. But behind that measured statement was something far greater, a foreshadowing, one that even his closest friends didn't fully understand, and no one felt the weight of it more than Phylicia Rashad. At 77, the woman millions knew as Claire Huxtable revealed, for the first time, the truth about her real-life son. Her voice, normally warm and composed, carried an edge of grief. In that trembling timbre, fans could hear both love and loss. It was a bond that began in 1984 when a 14-year-old Malcolm was cast as Theo Huxtable. For most of America, their connection existed only on screen, scripted mother and son, trading warmth and wit in the living room of the Cosby Show. But for Malcolm and Phylicia, something deeper formed almost instantly. From the first table read, Phylicia knew, "This is my boy." Malcolm later recalled that it didn't feel like an audition. It felt like meeting family. And over 8 seasons, their connection only grew. She guided him through the whiplash of sudden fame, teaching him how to handle the press without losing his soul, and how to choose roles that built a career instead of just feeding the spotlight. When his father passed in the late 90s, Phylicia didn't send condolences. She showed up with home-cooked meals and sat with him in silence for hours. On his 40th birthday, she gave him a handwritten letter. "You are proof that love and respect can build a family beyond blood." Even after the show ended in 1992, they spoke almost weekly. Phylicia sent him books with notes tucked inside. "Read this when you need balance." He kept them in a drawer like a private lifeline. So when Malcolm died at 54, Phylicia's anguished cry, "Not my Theo," wasn't a co-star mourning a colleague. It was a mother losing her child, and in the months before, she'd sensed something was changing. In Malcolm's final months, the rhythm of their calls began to falter. The once frequent check-ins turned into scattered conversations. His voice, normally vibrant, sounded tired, like each word had to travel through something heavy. Phylicia asked him more than once, "Are you okay, son?" Every time the answer came quick, almost too quick. "I'm fine, Mom." But a mother's instinct is sharper than words. She felt the distance, though she didn't press, something she now admits is one of her greatest regrets. 2 weeks before his passing, Malcolm called unexpectedly. "Just wanted to hear your voice," he said. What followed was an hour of reminiscing, laughing over behind-the-scenes moments from The Cosby Show, recalling silly pranks, forgotten bloopers, and quiet talks they'd shared in dressing rooms between takes. Phylicia remembers his laughter clearly, but underneath it there was something faint, almost like a goodbye disguised as a memory. Their bond wasn't just built on affection, it was forged through shared purpose. Both believed art should uplift communities, and Malcolm often joined Phylicia in theater projects and youth arts programs. When they worked together, she let him lead, but never hesitated to pull him back if he veered off course. "A good mother doesn't always agree with you," she told him once, "but she's always there when you need to come home." This was why, when Phylicia finally spoke about Malcolm's last days, her words hit so hard. They weren't the recollections of a distant colleague. They were the memories of someone who had walked beside him from boyhood to manhood. And as she shared them, a picture began to form, one of quiet withdrawal. Friends had noticed it too. Malcolm skipped social gatherings he once loved, postponed music tours without explanation, and posted less on social media. When he did, the captions carried a reflective, almost haunting tone. One of his last Instagram posts read, "Life is a delicate balance between holding on and letting go." At the time, it seemed philosophical. After his death, it felt like a coded farewell. To the public, Malcolm was still the smiling, charismatic artist they'd known for decades. But to those who paid attention, the change was impossible to miss. He was thinner, his eyes seemed deeper set, his smile slower to form and quicker to fade. At a Cosby Show cast reunion, Phylicia spotted it instantly. Across the room, Malcolm gave her a fleeting smile before slipping into silence. It was the kind of smile you give when words might betray you, warm but weighted. She didn't know it then, but it was their quiet goodbye. In the weeks leading up to his passing, Malcolm's actions took on an unsettling precision. He updated his will, made arrangements for his child's guardianship, even outlined the details for a simple memorial service. Friends found it odd. He'd never been one to dwell on death, much less plan for it. He also began visiting Watt Creek, a small, serene stretch of water near his home, tied to his childhood. Locals often saw him walking its banks, sometimes on the phone, other times simply staring at the current. He had long loved water, often sharing quotes about rivers and tides. But when his cause of death was later reported as drowning, those moments by the creek took on a chilling resonance. And then there were the messages. One close friend recalled a text that read, "I wish I had more time to say goodbye." Another remembered him saying, "Maybe this way is better." At the time, these seemed like fragments of reflection. In hindsight, they were echoes of closure. The most haunting, however, was a late-night Instagram post just days before his death. "We prepare for death by living fully." Followers took it as a piece of life advice, but for those who knew Malcolm, it was something else entirely, a final truth he was leaving behind. Every sign was there: the withdrawal, the cryptic words, the careful preparations, the meditative walks by the water. But like pieces of a puzzle scattered across time, no one saw the full picture until it was too late. When Phylicia Rashad finally broke her silence, it wasn't during a grand memorial or a primetime interview. It was in a quiet, almost intimate conversation, one that would ripple across the internet within hours. Her voice was steady, but each sentence felt carved from something raw. "Malcolm knew his time was running out," she said. At first, listeners thought she was speaking metaphorically, but Phylicia went on to reveal a truth Malcolm had guarded fiercely. He had been diagnosed with a rare neurological disease just months before his death. The illness was slowly stealing his motor skills, clouding his memory, and eroding his mental health. He never wanted pity. He didn't want to be remembered as the sick actor from The Cosby Show. Only a handful of people, Phylicia among them, knew the full scope of what he was facing. But then, Phylicia added something that made the air in the room shift. She hinted that Malcolm had been under another kind of pressure, something external, real, and dangerous. She didn't name names, but the vagueness only fueled speculation. Was it an industry feud, a personal threat, a force determined to keep something hidden? She recounted their last phone call just 2 days before his passing. His tone was calm, even peaceful, but the words landed like a final act. "If this is the end, Mom, I want my story to be told in full." Phylicia clutched the phone, desperate to believe he was simply being dramatic. But deep down, she knew he was preparing her. Later, as she replayed every conversation, every cryptic social post, every glance in those final months, the pieces clicked together. He had chosen to face the end on his own terms. And in his parting message, he left her a mission: to speak for those fighting battles in silence. Strength, he told her, isn't always in winning. It's in moving forward when no one sees you. For Phylicia, that was the breaking point. The secret she had guarded for months could no longer stay locked away. She had promised him his story would be told, and she intended to keep it. If Phylicia's revelations uncovered the quiet storm Malcolm had been weathering, the events of his final hours played out like a scene from a tense drama, full of layered tensions, whispered conflicts, and unanswered questions. Just hours before he was found, Malcolm attended a private gathering. It wasn't a public reunion or an industry event, but a small tribute connected to a mental health awareness project he had been quietly developing. The guest list was selective and people he trusted most, but inside that room, the air was thick. Witnesses recall Phylicia pulling actress Tempest Bledsoe, Vanessa Huxtable, aside. Her voice, normally calm, was icy. "Did you think the secret would stay buried forever? You're going to pay dearly." No one knew exactly what she meant, but within minutes, voices rose and the conversation turned heated. Rumors had long circulated about tension between Phylicia and Tempest, creative disputes, financial disagreements, even speculation about interference with Malcolm's personal project, a documentary called Behind the Sitcom Smile. The film was rumored to reveal uncomfortable truths about the show's behind-the-scenes reality. Malcolm, usually the peacemaker, stepped between them, but instead of calming the room, he said something that stopped everyone cold. "We've been lying to ourselves for decades. This isn't a family. This is a cover-up." It was the kind of statement that couldn't be taken back. Minutes later, smaller groups broke off into hushed conversations. Malcolm slipped out quietly. Hours later, he would be found near his private lake. Official cause of death: drowning. Theories swirled almost instantly. The tension at that meeting, the fact that Malcolm and Tempest had recently been locked in a royalties and licensing dispute, and most suspicious of all, the disappearance of all hard drives and footage from behind the sitcom Smile just 2 days after his death. The thief? Unknown. Nothing else was taken. Those who saw Malcolm leave that night said his eyes looked darker than they'd ever seen, and the last words he was overheard saying were chilling in their brevity. Not again. Whether coincidence or catalyst, that evening became a fracture line in the narrative, marking the point where tragedy and suspicion became forever intertwined. The official account of Malcolm Jamal Warner's death was quick, almost too quick. A drowning, they said, accidental. But the timeline didn't sit right with those who knew him, or those who were there in the hours before. That weekend, Malcolm was supposed to be in Santa Barbara with close friends. Instead, without warning, he drove over 160 kilometers to his secluded property in Big Bear. The only clue was a short text to a colleague. Got something to take care of. It was sent less than 12 hours before his body was found. Local residents reported strange noises and lights by the lake around midnight. When police arrived, there were no signs of a struggle, but key details didn't add up. The property's surveillance cameras had conveniently lost footage during the exact window of his death. Then came the autopsy, completed in under 48 hours. Toxicology results, which could have revealed whether Malcolm had alcohol or drugs in his system, were never made public. To make matters stranger, someone pushed for an immediate cremation before the family could request further testing. His mother refused, insisting the body remain intact for a full review. Phone records showed the last text Malcolm received came from Tempest Bledsoe on the night he died. The contents have never been revealed. Tempest herself canceled all appearances and wiped certain social media accounts in the days that followed. A security guard claimed to have seen a black SUV leaving the property minutes before police arrived. No license plate was recorded. Then there was the voicemail, allegedly sent to a close friend, where Malcolm's voice was steady but grim. If anything happens to me, let the world know I was silenced. Piece by piece, the details painted a portrait that didn't look like an accident at all. There were gaps in the evidence, lapses in procedure, and too many coincidences to ignore. For those who had heard Phylicia Rashad's earlier warning that Malcolm knew his time was running out, the unanswered question grew louder. Was this fate or a carefully staged ending? The shock of Malcolm's death didn't fade. It ignited. Within hours, news outlets broke the story. Social media lit up with disbelief, grief, and a rising undercurrent of outrage. Hashtags like #JusticeForMalcolm and #RememberTheo spread across timelines. Fans shared old clips from The Cosby Show. Theo's warm grin, his quick wit, paired with messages about the man behind the role. Colleagues poured out tributes. Director spoke of an actor who left more than performances on set. He left pieces of himself. Musicians recalled how he championed emerging artists, always willing to give his time. One filmmaker summed it up. Some people leave when the cameras stop rolling. Malcolm stayed. Phylicia Rashad didn't retreat after her revelations. Instead, she turned grief into momentum, launching the Inside Voice Project, a mental health initiative focused on Black men in the entertainment industry. Malcolm fought in silence, she said. I won't let another soul fight alone if I can help it. The project quickly drew support from artists, activists, and community organizations. Its mission was simple but urgent. Break the stigma, create safe spaces, and give voice to those carrying unseen burdens. Meanwhile, a television special began production. Not just a highlight reel of Malcolm's career, but a portrait of the man himself. Private interviews, never-before-seen backstage footage, and testimonies from those closest to him would aim to reveal the complexity of his life, the artist, the father, the friend, the quiet warrior. Across the country, fans organized memorial gatherings. In parks, community centers, and small theaters, people watched favorite episodes, lit candles, and shared personal stories. Some had met him once, others had never been in the same room, but all felt like they knew him. His legacy became more than just roles and awards. It became a message about strength that doesn't need an audience, about noticing the signs in those we love, about asking the second question when someone says they're fine. For those who grew up watching Theo Huxtable, Malcolm's image would never fade, not because of the unanswered mysteries, but because of the enduring reminder he left. Every person carries a story worth hearing, before it's too late. When the stage lights fade and the credits roll, what remains is rarely the plot of the show, it's the people who made us feel something. For millions, Malcolm Jamal Warner wasn't just a character. He was part of their living rooms, their childhoods, their memories of family. But the true measure of his life wasn't just in the roles he played. It was in the quiet choices he made off screen. He carried his battles privately, not because he was ashamed, but because he wanted the world to remember his laughter, not his pain. Phylicia Rashad's voice still echoes when she recalls his final words. "If this is the end, Mom, I want my story to be told in full." And in telling it, she has turned grief into purpose. The Inside Voice Project continues to grow, providing resources and platforms for those facing invisible struggles. In that way, Malcolm's fight and his message live on. His story is now more than a personal tragedy. It's a call to action, a reminder that the strongest people in the room are often the ones hiding the heaviest burdens. That silence doesn't always mean peace. It can mean exhaustion. That checking in on someone once isn't enough. Memorials still happen, sometimes in bustling cities, sometimes in quiet corners of the country. People gather to watch old episodes, to tell stories, to share how Malcolm inspired them to dream, to create, or simply to keep going. And for those who knew him personally, every shared memory is both a gift and a wound. They remember the way he would light up a room, the way he'd make space for others to shine, and the way he could make you feel like you mattered, even in a crowded set or a busy studio. The unanswered questions around his death will likely remain, but his legacy is certain. It is written not only in the scripts he brought to life, but in the lives he touched, quietly, consistently, and without needing the spotlight. So maybe the best way to honor Malcolm Jamal Warner is to do what he asked without saying it. See the people around us, listen when they speak, and when they don't. Because sometimes the last thing someone says isn't their goodbye. It's their way of asking us to keep telling their story.